My own father looked straight at the guests, pointed at me, and smiled. "Don't mind her, she's just the maid." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone I was his daughter. But before I could say a single word, the bride looked at me, dropped her bouquet, and whispered, "Emma, what are you doing here?" In that moment, my father's biggest lie began to fall apart. My father smiled proudly, wrapped one arm around his fiancée, and raised his champagne glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for celebrating one of the happiest nights of my life." The ballroom filled with applause. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. A string quartet played softly in the background. Everything looked perfect. Except for me. I stood near the kitchen entrance, wearing a black maid's apron, holding a silver tray filled with champagne. Then, my father pointed directly at me. He laughed. "Don't mind her. She's just the maid helping tonight." The guests smiled politely. Some nodded. Others didn't even look at me. No one knew. The woman my father had just called the maid was his only daughter. I lowered my eyes. Not because I was ashamed. Because I had spent 32 years learning that arguing with him only made things worse. My name is Emma Carter. For as long as I can remember, my father loved introducing successful people, business partners, friends, my younger sister, his fiancée, everyone, except me. To him, I was the family mistake, the daughter who never made him proud. So when he asked me to help with the catering for his engagement party, I already knew what that really meant. He didn't want me sitting with the guests. He didn't want anyone asking who I was. He wanted me invisible. I smiled politely and continued serving drinks. Then, the ballroom doors opened. Every guest turned toward the entrance. The bride had arrived. She looked breathtaking in an elegant ivory gown, holding a bouquet of white roses. She smiled warmly at the guests. Then her eyes landed on me. She stopped walking. Her smile disappeared. The bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the marble floor. The entire room went silent. She stared at me for several long seconds. Then, with tears filling her eyes, she walked straight past my father, past every guest, stopped in front of me, grabbed both of my hands, and whispered words that changed everything. "Emma, why are you wearing a maid's apron?" The room froze. My father suddenly looked terrified. Because for the first time that evening, he realized the one person he could never lie to had just recognized Meth Bride's words echoed through the silent ballroom. "Emma, why are you wearing a maid's apron?" Every guest turned toward me. My father stepped forward so quickly that he nearly knocked over a champagne glass. "Natalie," he forced a laugh, "I think you've mistaken her for someone else." The bride didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine. "Have I?" She gently squeezed my hands. "Emma Carter. The woman who helped me rebuild my career after my divorce. The woman who stayed late every night to mentor me when everyone else gave up. You think I wouldn't recognize you?" A wave of whispers spread across the ballroom. My father swallowed hard. My younger sister, Olivia, crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "She's just trying to make tonight about herself." I almost answered. Instead, I took a slow breath. Because I had spent my entire life trying to defend myself. It had never changed anything. 20 years earlier, our family looked completely different. When I was 12, my mother died after a long illness. My father changed overnight. Not into a cruel man, just a distant one. A year later, he remarried. His new wife brought her daughter, Olivia, into our home. At first, I thought I had gained a sister. Instead, I slowly lost my place in the family. Birthdays became Olivia's. Vacations became Olivia's. School achievements became Olivia's. Whenever I accomplished something, my father always had the same response. "That's nice, Emma, but let's not make a big deal out of it." I stopped expecting praise. I stopped expecting fairness. Eventually, I stopped expecting to matter. Years later, I earned a scholarship to college. No family celebration. No congratulations. My father simply handed me a small suitcase and said, "If you're old enough to leave, you're old enough to pay your own way." So I did. I worked mornings in a coffee shop, studied during the day, waited tables at night. Every success I had, I earned without my family's help. When I finally built a respected career, I never called my father to prove him wrong. Because deep down, I had already accepted something painful. Some people never change. Back in the ballroom, Natalie looked around the room, confused. She turned to my father. "You told me Emma couldn't attend tonight because she was traveling for work." She looked back at my black apron. "So why is she serving your guests?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in years, the man who always had an answer had none. And I realized, tonight wasn't just about an engagement. It was about the truth finally catching up with a lifetime of lies. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every guest was watching. Not the decorations. Not the engagement ring. Me. Natalie slowly turned toward my father. Her voice was calm. "Richard, why did you tell me your daughter couldn't make it tonight?" My father forced a smile. I didn't want Emma to feel uncomfortable. Before Natalie could answer, Olivia laughed. "She's always been dramatic. She probably enjoys all this attention." For the first time that night, I looked directly at my sister. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I finally understood something. People who spend years trying to make you feel small become terrified the moment you stop believing them. Natalie frowned. "Attention?" She looked around the ballroom. "She's wearing an apron. She's been serving drinks. And none of you thought that was strange?" No one answered. Several guests quietly looked down at their plates. One elderly woman whispered to her husband, "I thought she was hired staff." My father quickly interrupted. Emma insisted on helping. That was the lie. The biggest lie of the evening. I calmly placed the silver tray on a nearby table. Then I spoke. For the first time. Actually, I never volunteered. The room froze. My father stared at me. I continued. 3 weeks ago, Dad called me. He said the catering company was short one person. He asked if I could help for a few hours. A guest frowned. "You mean, you weren't invited?" I looked at my father. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I answered quietly. "No. I wasn't invited." A wave of shocked whispers spread across the ballroom. Natalie's expression changed completely. She slowly removed her engagement ring. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly. She looked at Richard. "Is that true?" My father panicked. "Natalie, please. It's not what it looks like." She shook her head. "No. It's exactly what it looks like." She walked over to me, then turned back toward every guest. "Do you know why I recognized Emma?" Nobody spoke. Natalie smiled. "Because 3 years ago, when I was unemployed, and everyone else closed their doors, Emma was the only person who believed in me. The room became silent again. She helped me prepare for interviews. She stayed after work every evening. She never asked for anything in return. Then Natalie looked at Richard. And today, you introduced the kindest woman I've ever met as the maid. Richard looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. But the night was only beginning. Because Natalie wasn't finished. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a small white envelope, and held it in the air. Before I decide whether this engagement continues, everyone deserves to know what Emma did for me, and what her own family never bothered to learn. Natalie held the white envelope in her hands. The ballroom was so quiet that even the musicians had stopped playing. Everyone waited. Richard, my father, looked terrified. Natalie, he said nervously. Whatever that is, we can discuss it later. She looked at him with disappointment. No. You've hidden the truth long enough. She slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper was old, its edges slightly worn. Natalie smiled sadly. 3 years ago, after my divorce, I lost everything. My savings. My confidence. My career. I was sleeping on my sister's couch because I couldn't even afford rent. She looked toward me. One evening, I sat alone in my office ready to resign. Everyone told me I wasn't good enough. But one person refused to let me quit. She unfolded the letter. Emma wrote this for me. Natalie began reading aloud. Your value isn't decided by the people who rejected you. One day, someone will thank you for refusing to give up today. Until then, keep going. Several guests quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Natalie folded the letter. I kept these words in my purse every single day. They reminded me that my worst moment didn't have to become my whole life. She turned toward Richard. The woman you called the maid helped save my future. Richard stood speechless. Olivia rolled her eyes. Oh, please. It's just a letter. Natalie looked directly at her. No. It's character. And that's something your sister has in abundance. A respected businessman standing near the front finally spoke. Richard, I've known you for almost 15 years. I had no idea Emma was your daughter. Another guest nodded. I thought she worked for the catering company. One by one, the guests began asking questions. You never introduced her? Why was she serving food? Why wasn't she sitting with the family? Richard looked trapped. Every answer would only expose another lie. Finally, he whispered, I made a mistake. I looked at him calmly. For years, that was all I had wanted to hear. But strangely, it no longer mattered. Natalie slowly removed her engagement ring. She placed it gently on the table beside Richard's champagne glass. The sound of metal touching glass echoed through the silent ballroom. Richard stared at the ring. Natalie, what are you doing? She took one step back, then said words no one in the room would ever forget. If a man can humiliate his own daughter in front of strangers, I can't trust him to honor a marriage. Gasps filled the room. Richard reached toward her. She stepped away. The engagement was over. And for the first time in my life, my father realized that the lie he told about me had cost him the person he loved most, and no one moved. No one spoke. The engagement ring still rested on the table. Richard stared at it as though the last few minutes had been a nightmare. He looked at Natalie. Natalie, please don't do this. She shook her head. I didn't end this engagement because you lied to me. She paused. I ended it because lying about your own daughter came so naturally. The words hit harder than a slap. Several guests quietly began picking up their coats. The celebration was over. But the truth was only beginning. My father slowly turned toward me. For the first time that night, there was no anger in his eyes. Only panic. Emma, please, tell everyone this is just a misunderstanding. I looked at him for a long moment, then asked one simple question. When was the last time you introduced me as your daughter? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because he couldn't remember. Neither could I. Olivia suddenly stepped forward. This is ridiculous. She's destroying Dad's happiness over one stupid joke. I looked at my sister, then quietly replied, a joke makes everyone laugh. Humiliation only makes one person cry. The ballroom fell silent again. Even Olivia had no answer. An elderly gentleman who had been one of my father's closest friends for years stood up. He looked disappointed. Richard, I've attended your birthday parties, Christmas dinners, company events. I've known your family for over a decade. He paused. Tonight is the first time I've ever learned you even had another daughter. Those words echoed through the room. One by one, people began realizing the same thing. They had known Richard for years, but they had never known Emma. Not because I stayed away, because my father kept me hidden. Natalie walked beside me. She smiled gently. You know, the strongest people I've ever met all had one thing in common. I looked at her. They stopped asking people to love them, and started choosing people who already did. For some reason, that sentence broke something inside me. Not with pain, with peace. I finally understood. I had spent 32 years trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. And tonight, I was finally done trying. I untied the black maid's apron, folded it carefully, placed it on the nearest chair. Then I looked directly at my father. My voice stayed calm. You didn't embarrass me tonight. He looked confused. I continued. You showed everyone who you really are. For the first time in my life. I wasn't speaking to make him understand. I was speaking because I no longer needed his approval. Natalie picked up her purse. She smiled. Emma, would you like to leave with me? I looked around the ballroom one last time. The decorations, the flowers, the people, the father who had spent years pretending I didn't exist. Then I smiled. Yes. And together, we walked toward the exit. Behind us, no one stopped us. Because everyone knew, the real guest of honor had just walked out. 6 months passed. Life became quieter. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally stopped chasing people who never wanted to catch me. I accepted a position as Director of Client Relations at one of Chicago's fastest-growing consulting firms. Ironically, the recommendation that opened the door came from Natalie. She never forgot what I had done for her. And I never forgot what she did for me that night. She gave me something my own family never had. Respect. For the first time in my life, I loved Mondays. I walked into an office where people greeted me with smiles instead of comparisons. Nobody introduced me as the other daughter. Nobody asked why I wasn't enough. Here, I simply belonged. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, my assistant knocked softly on my office door. Emma, there's a family here asking to see you. I looked through the glass wall. Standing in the reception area were 3 familiar faces. My father, Olivia, my stepmother, None of them looked the same. My father had lost the confidence that once filled every room. Olivia looked uncomfortable. My stepmother couldn't even look in my direction. I took a deep breath. Send them in. They entered slowly. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, my father broke the silence. Emma. I'm sorry. The words sounded strange coming from him. Almost unfamiliar. He continued. After the engagement, everything changed. Our friends stopped calling. My business lost clients. People started asking questions I couldn't answer. He lowered his head. I deserved it. Olivia finally looked at me. I blamed you. I told everyone you ruined Dad's life. She paused. But I realize now. He ruined it himself. For the first time. She sounded honest. My father reached into his briefcase. He placed an old photo album on my desk. I recognized it immediately. It was filled with pictures of my childhood. Pictures I thought had disappeared years ago. I found these in the attic. I should have given them to you a long time ago. I slowly opened the album. There I was. A little girl riding on my father's shoulders. Holding his hand at the zoo. Blowing out birthday candles. Before everything changed. A tear rolled down my cheek. Not because I missed the past, but because I finally accepted. The father in those pictures no longer existed. My father looked at me. I know I can't change what I did. I know I can't ask you to forgive me. But I needed you to know. I've never been more ashamed of myself. The office became silent. I closed the photo album, looked directly into his eyes, and smiled gently. Dad, I forgave you months ago. His eyes filled with hope. Until I finished my sentence. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. The hope disappeared. I continued. You spent years teaching me I didn't belong in your family. Now I've built a life where I finally do belong. He nodded slowly. Because he knew. There was nothing left to argue. As they stood to leave, my father stopped at the office door. Without turning around, he quietly said, I'm proud of you, Emma. For 32 years. Those were the words I had dreamed of hearing. But today, they no longer had the power to heal me. Because I had already healed myself. He walked out. And this time, I didn't cry. I simply watched the elevator doors close, knowing that some chapters are meant to end, so better ones can finally begin. 1 year later. Spring had returned to Chicago. The cold winter mornings were gone. The trees outside my office